I also wanted to talk to you about your show. So tell me about it.
So I host a weekly foreign affairs program on SiriusXM Progress. That's channel 127. Right now, SiriusXM is free to everybody, so you can just click a link, listen to it anytime on demand. Highly recommend it. Lots of great political talk. But particularly on the Progress channel, what I focus on is citizen movements and activism overseas, right? So we look at and take case studies of what's happening overseas. How can we strengthen our democracy, learn those lessons and apply them here from home? We're not very subtle about it. We draw direct comparisons. So recently had done an episode about what other countries are doing in the face of Corona. Are there some of those lessons we can learn, certainly from South Korea and Senegal? But also did an episode on authoritarianism, right? How in Hungary, the president there used the coronavirus epidemic to eliminate elections, eliminate any checks and balances on the administration, and effectively declared himself a dictator with the support of his parliament. So let's
Yeah.
not forget, a lot of this authoritarianism creep that happens because people in Congress also let them get away with it. So that's certainly something to remember as we see how Congress responds to the coronavirus challenge here and a lot of the resources that we need in trying to activate for small businesses and working families. But tune in. It runs on the weekends and the mornings, 10 a.m., 11 a.m., Saturdays and Sundays. And anything that you want to know about the world, we're happy to dig into it for you and give you those answers. But now's a time when we can learn a lot from each other, especially since the virus knows no boundaries. Our lessons should know no boundaries as well.
I obviously I can't help but also when I analyze the things I see in other countries, I try to see what sort of comparisons can be made. And I get what you're saying, the link between the executive branch and legislative, but I'm not as worried about that here because I saw how serious the Senate took the allegations during the impeachment trial against Donald Trump. I mean,
Yep.
serious checks and or balances. So I'm curious, as you're seeing these movements, because look, when we think of citizen movements, we generally think of them in a positive light, but not all of them are. You study movements based on xenophobia and, religious bigotry, anti-science movements, things like that. As you see this new sort of protest movement starting in America, being promoted heavily on Fox News, being funded by these big organizations. Do you see parallels there with some of what you've been documenting in other countries?
It's fascinating to look at what's called religious nationalism and the idea that church and state aren't necessarily separate, right? That you see this with evangelical community, particularly in the United States. Those who've signed up with Donald Trump really are all in a way that has nothing to do with the values and spirituality of the faith and everything to do with power dynamics. They've managed to frame the coronavirus now as part of the continuation of the pro-life movement, right? So you are, if you believe coronavirus, you are pro-death. It's a hoax. It's trying to stop people from gathering in the name of the Lord, and grifters really do gravitate towards this. So it only takes a handful of prosperity gospel type ministers to say, "I need you to show up here and put some money towards making sure that the house of God still stands through this," and people start forking over money. Paula White, Trump's advisor on spiritual matters, the other day released a video asking for $90 or $9 or whatever you can give at this time, and openly admitted that it wasn't going to go to community hospitals or coronavirus, but effectively lining her own pocketbook and the pocketbook of her church. Now, I will say that there's a strong anti-science element to this as well that goes way back to the abolition movement when people were arguing for equal rights and that all people are created equal. The anti-abolitionists used religion and said that it is not, this is what God's plan is. They were anti-science, came up with all sorts of things. So there's a deep history of the right-wing fundamentalists adopting anti-science, anti-expertise, and using religion to motivate people. And this, Donald Trump is the direct result of this movement. I will say also, this is not unique, obviously, to evangelicals. We see this happening in the Islamic world as well. We saw this happen in the Hasidic community in Borough Park in New York, where there was a huge cluster that the city had to deal with. Pakistan, heading into the month of Ramadan, is the only Muslim majority country that has not shut down mosques because, again, the grassroots influence of these religious leaders is so strong. They effectively run the government behind the scenes. So it is at religious nationalism is going to be a challenge that we have to confront globally.
Like talking about these sorts of leaders, one of the things that bothers me so much, obviously Trump is a perfect example, I think, of the anti-science approach. We've seen, preachers and ministers, like you've talked about here in America too. We've seen, the president and Fox News pushing effectively a miracle cure in hydroxychloroquine. Damn the evidence. We can't wait for that. It's the best thing. It's going to bring you back like Lazarus.
By the way, the Veterans Administration just released a study talking about how, no, they've tested it in a rigorous way, and actually people are still dying at the same rates. So all it ended up doing was taking the drug off the market for people who actually were dealing with either malaria or lupus.
Exactly. And so, like, one of the things that bothers me the most is he comes into this not caring about what the doctors are saying, not taking it seriously. Now we have this mounting death toll. Well over 40,000 Americans have died, and there's no willingness to accept responsibility. I mean, he literally said, I don't take any responsibility. And so now we've got sort of lies about the past to provide sort of a scapegoat, and also distractions. So, I'm sure you saw that immigration is apparently a thing of the past. He's not going to allow immigration anymore. How did you respond to that as a potential distraction from his failures in dealing with coronavirus?
It's not the first one that he's done, right? This is just part of his MO, is to take, rather than be confronted with his own evidence. I mean, the other day he was saying, well, I've been quarantined inside the White House for months. And like, actually, you held a rally in March. He's like, oh, yeah, maybe I did do that. And so it's just complete denial of his own actions and behaviors. I got caught up and personally got really upset. I was like, you're cutting funding to the World Health Organization, but the World Health Organization is so great. This is what it does. And what I realized is I was getting outraged about this other thing over here that kind of matters, but not really at the end of the day, because it's going to continue, and not directing my outrage directly at the fact that Donald Trump failed to prepare and failed to respond to this crisis in ways that are tried and true, that are known. He did not have to reinvent the wheel here. So I see that that's what the immigration shutdown is going to be about. I mean, we're all going to get upset, like, oh, we're a country of immigrants. Immigrants contribute to the economy, and come up with all of our facts and figures. But it distracts it onto a piece of the policy that at the end of the day right now is not the policy that's killing us. Yeah. The policy failures that are killing us are Trump's inability to coordinate, provide testing for everybody, inability to coordinate with governors and share resources with the states, and his disbelief in science. So I think that's where we need to focus on. Listen, I don't even know that anybody wants to be immigrating or coming to the U.S. right now.
That's true.
Because frankly, their countries are better off than ours. We're doing the worst in response to this virus. So I'm not seeing that this is actually going to have a net impact in the next couple of months.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's been very successful the past few years in limiting legal immigration in a ton of other ways. I don't know how much there's left to cut off. But one last question I have for you, because he has an answer. So you just said he wasn't prepared, and he has an answer for that recently, for why supposedly he wasn't prepared. And it is to blame the past administration. And I've wondered this whole time, all of you are out of power now, hearing this guy who had time to prepare and chose not to say that the cupboards were bare, that they were left with inadequate testing regulations, and basically their resources weren't there. And so I've been curious, how have you responded seeing day after day him scapegoat the past administration to cover for his own failures?
Well, one, he's been in charge for 3 years. So this all belongs to him. There was a point in time early in the Obama administration when the economy was collapsing. It's like, well, a lot of this was because of George Bush, and you can get away with that for the first 6 to 8 months. And then you have to accept the buck stops here at the White House. It's your responsibility. So it is Donald Trump's responsibility. He's up for re-election, right? It's his presidency. These are his problems. Second, there was a tabletop exercise with 30 transition administration officials, half of whom have since left the Trump administration because he can't seem to appoint or keep anybody there. And one of the exercises was specifically about walking through what to do in a SARS-like respiratory transmitted, person-to-person transmitted pandemic crisis. So they had the full plan, and not just something that sat on the shelf. They were walk through it, talk through it. And oh, by the way, it's still available on the internet. You can see the whole thing. They had the people and resources in place, everything between FEMA and DHS, CDC. They know how to do this. They just need to be allowed and given the resources to take care of the American public. And that's the thing. Trump is getting in the way. He had an opportunity to just let people do their jobs and take the advice of experts and take the credit for it. Right? He could have turned this into a huge win for himself.
Yeah.
But his ego just will not let him do anything that anybody else has thought of or considered.
That's not only a great response to what he's been saying, but totally true at the end. He could have actually protected America. He could have protected his own. He could have had the same.
Been the hero of this and not had to do very much because again, all of this is in train. It's logistics of moving things from point A to B to C. People know how to do this. That's why we have a federal government. That's why we have the deep state. It's their job. Let them do their jobs, and he could have taken all the credit for it.
He could have. Would have really helped him.
But instead, he's now going to be effectively, spreading a virus amongst his base and killing his own voters, which I don't understand that as an electoral strategy.
Yeah, I don't understand it on any level. But thank you so much for joining us, Naira. It's great to finally have you back on and help us with your expertise. We really do appreciate it.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Oh, and everybody, check out our show, Resistance Abroad.
Thank you. It's Resistance Abroad, Sirius XM Progress, and you can also follow me at Nayyaroar, Nayyeroar. My DMs are open.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.